Jason Okafor stood by the tall glass window of his penthouse, looking down at Lagos. The city was alive, as always. Cars crawled along the roads like glowing insects. Streetlights flickered. Somewhere below, horns blared, generators hummed, and people argued, laughed, struggled, and survived. From this height, everything looked small, controlled, almost peaceful. But Jason felt none of that peace. At 42, Jason Okafor had more money than he could ever spend. His company, Okafor Group, owned hotels, luxury restaurants, real estate across Lagos and Abuja, and investments abroad. Newspapers called him quietly dangerous, the kind of billionaire who didn't talk much but moved the markets with a single decision. Yet tonight, like many nights before, he felt hollow. Behind him, his assistant cleared her throat softly. "Sir, the board meeting agenda has been sent to your tablet." Jason nodded without turning. "Thank you. You can go." She hesitated, then left. The door closed with a soft click. Silence returned. Jason loosened his tie and let out a slow breath. The suit he wore was perfectly tailored. Italian fabric, custom shoes, a watch worth more than some people's houses. Everything about him screamed success. But success had come with a cost. Everyone around him wanted something. They laughed too hard at his jokes. They agreed too quickly with his opinions. They spoke carefully, like every word was an investment. Even kindness felt calculated. He could no longer tell who was real. Once, long ago, Jason had been a normal boy from a modest home in eastern Nigeria. His father had been strict but honest. His mother warm but firm. He had grown up believing that effort mattered more than appearance. Somewhere along the road to billions, that truth got lost. Jason turned away from the window and picked up a small burner phone from the drawer of his desk. No name saved. One number only. Arthur. His chief operating officer. The only man he trusted completely. Arthur was the only person who knew about Jason's strange habit. Every few months, Jason disappeared. No security convoy, no assistance, no announcements. He became someone else, not because he wanted adventure, but because he wanted truth. The world treated a man differently when it thought he had nothing. And Jason needed to see what kind of world he had helped build. Jason drove himself this time. No chauffeur, no black SUV. Just an old borrowed sedan with scratches along the side and a faint smell of petrol inside. He parked near a quiet street market not far from Yaba, where second-hand clothes were sold openly on wooden tables. The air smelled of dust, sweat, roasted corn, and engine oil. Jason stepped out of the car and adjusted his cap. Here, nobody knew him. Nobody cared. He walked slowly between the stalls, hands in his pockets, listening to traders shout prices, argue with customers, and laugh loudly when a joke landed well. He stopped at a stall with faded jackets piled carelessly on top of each other. "How much for this?" he asked, lifting a brown corduroy jacket with worn elbows. The seller glanced at him. 3,000. Jason nodded and paid without bargaining. He bought an old plaid shirt, a pair of faded jeans, a belt with cracks in the leather, thick framed glasses with plain lenses, work boots that had clearly walked many hard roads before. He changed in a nearby public restroom. The mirror above the sink was cracked. The light flickered. Jason studied his reflection. The man staring back at him did not look like a billionaire. He looked tired, slightly unshaven, ordinary. The kind of man people passed every day without noticing. For the first time since leaving his penthouse, Jason felt lighter. He drove toward Victoria Island, where glass buildings rose proudly, and money spoke louder than character. His destination stood out even among luxury establishments. The Brass Crown Steakhouse. One of the finest restaurants in Lagos, a place for politicians, oil executives, celebrities, and men who never looked at price tags. Jason had bought the restaurant group 2 years earlier. He had never eaten there. Tonight would be different. He parked across the street and sat in the car for a moment, watching well-dressed guests step out of expensive cars. Women in heels, men in tailored suits. Laughter carried easily through the night. Jason opened his door and stepped out. The contrast was immediate. As he walked toward the entrance, he felt eyes on him, curious, disapproving, confused. Inside, warm lighting washed over leather seats and polished wood. Soft music played. The air smelled of grilled meat and expensive wine. At the host stand stood a tall woman in a fitted black dress, perfect hair, perfect smile. The smile faded slightly when she saw Jason. "Yes?" she asked, her tone polite but distant. "A table for one," Jason said calmly. She looked him over. Shoes, jacket, glasses. "Do you have a reservation?" "No." A pause. She glanced around the dining area, then back at her tablet. "We're quite full tonight." "I don't mind waiting," Jason replied. Another pause. Her fingers tapped the screen slowly, more for show than necessity. "I can seat you," she finally said, "but only near the kitchen." Jason nodded. "That's fine." She led him through the restaurant. Conversation slowed as he passed. Some guests stared openly. Others pretended not to. He felt it clearly. The judgment. This was the world he owned. He was placed at a small table near swinging kitchen doors. The table wobbled slightly when he sat. Loud clanging came from behind the doors, a sharp contrast to the calm luxury elsewhere. Jason smiled faintly. Perfect. From this corner, he could see everything. Waiters moved quickly, smiles bright for certain tables, dull for others. A manager in a tight suit laughed loudly with a group of rich men, then snapped sharply at a young staff member moments later. Jason recognized the manager instantly. Gregory Danjuma. According to reports, he was efficient, charismatic, profitable. According to Jason's eyes, he was dangerous. Jason picked up the menu and waited. He didn't know yet that tonight would change far more than a single restaurant. He didn't know that somewhere behind those kitchen doors, a young woman with worn shoes and a heavy heart was gathering the courage to risk everything. And he didn't know that before the night ended, a simple folded napkin would shake the foundation of his entire empire. He sat at table 32 and did nothing for a while. That was the first thing he learned. When you look like you don't belong, the world becomes comfortable ignoring you. The table was small and round, with a thin leg that made it wobble if you rested your arm too hard. The chair was not broken, but it was not steady either. It creaked lightly whenever he shifted his weight. Behind him, the swinging kitchen doors kept opening and closing. Bang, dot, bang. A waiter rushed past, carrying 2 plates, not looking at Jason once. A busboy followed, holding a tray of used wine glasses, his eyes focused straight ahead like he was trained not to see anyone. Jason picked up the menu slowly. It was thick, leather, gold lettering. The menu was a message. If you have to ask the price, you shouldn't be here. Jason's eyes moved across it. Steaks, aged for weeks, imported cheeses, foreign wine names written like they were prayers, items that did not feed hunger, items that fed status. He turned the page. Then he stopped turning. Because something else caught his attention. Not the food. The people. At the center of the restaurant, near the best seats, a group of men were laughing loudly. Their voices were deep and sure, the way men sound when they believe they own the world. Their suits were sharp. Their watches glittered. The women with them smiled with their mouths, but their eyes were tired. Jason stared at them for a moment, not because he envied them, but because he knew them. Not their names, but their type. Men who would shake his hand and call him chairman, then go behind his back and call him a wicked businessman. Men who would praise his humility in public and envy his money in private. Men who didn't know the difference between respect and fear. A waiter leaned over their table, smiling hard, nodding quickly. Jason watched the waiter's face. It was the same face people wore around him. A face that said, "I see money, not a person." Jason looked around. 2 tables away, a couple sat near the window. The woman's phone was propped up beside her glass. She wasn't eating. She was taking pictures. She angled the fork dot. She adjusted the lighting dot. She smiled at the camera, A waiter stood nearby, waiting patiently, like a statue. Jason noticed something simple. The waiter's back was slightly bent toward her table, like a bow. But when that waiter walked past Jason's table, the waiter straightened. Not even a glance. Jason let out a slow breath. It was not anger he felt. It was disappointment. Because this was not just a restaurant. This was a lesson. A place where the unwritten rules were practiced daily until they became normal. He had built an empire full of luxury. He had built a world where small people served big people. And he had told himself that it was business, not character. Now, sitting near the kitchen, he could see it clearly. A rich man could be rude and still get respect. A poor man could be polite and still get ignored. Jason tapped the menu lightly with his finger. He was not here to shame anyone. He was here to know the truth. A shadow moved near the front. Jason's eyes followed it. The manager, Gregory Danjuma. Gregory wore a tight black suit that was trying too hard. His hair was neatly cut, his beard lined cleanly, and he walked with confidence that felt rehearsed. He shook hands with a man at the center table and laughed loudly. Jason noticed the laugh. Too loud, too eager. A laugh meant to be heard. Gregory leaned toward the men and said something that made them laugh again. One of them slapped the table. Gregory smiled like he had won something. Then Gregory turned away from them, and the smile disappeared. Just like that. No slow fading. It fell off his face as if it was never real. A young busboy came too close, trying to squeeze past. Gregory stopped him with a small hand gesture. He leaned close to the boy's ear and spoke low. Jason couldn't hear the words, but he saw the boy's reaction. The boy's shoulders tightened. His face changed. He nodded quickly and moved away, almost running, like a person escaping a slap he couldn't see. Jason's jaw tightened. He stared at Gregory's back as Gregory walked away. There was something about that man. Not just arrogance. Control. The kind of control that enjoys fear. Jason placed the menu down and folded his hands. The longer he sat there, the more invisible he became. And in that invisibility, he could finally see. Rose Benson was tired before she even started her shift. The tiredness was not only in her body, it was in her mind. It was the kind of tiredness that didn't go away with sleep, because even when she slept, her brain stayed awake, counting bills, remembering hospital words, hearing her brother cough in the dark. She stood behind the kitchen doors for a moment, tying her apron tighter. The apron was clean but old. The fabric had faded at the edges, like it had been washed too many times. Rose checked her name tag. Rose. She touched it lightly, like it could remind her who she was. Not just a waitress, a sister, a guardian, a person trying not to drown. Rose, you're on table 32, another waitress murmured as she passed. Rose nodded. Table 32. She didn't need anyone to explain what that meant. Everyone knew table 32 was punishment, not official punishment. But punishment still. If the hostess didn't like you, you got that table. If the guest didn't look rich, they got that table. If the manager wanted to prove a point, he watched that table. Rose took a breath and walked out into the dining area. The restaurant looked beautiful in the way expensive places always did. Soft yellow light, dark wood, clean floors you could see your reflection in. The kind of place that made you whisper without being told. She scanned the tables quickly. Table 32 was near the kitchen, tucked like a secret. And the man was sitting alone. Rose slowed slightly as she approached. He didn't look rich, that was obvious. His jacket was old, his jeans were faded, his boots were worn. But there was something else. He was calm. He wasn't looking around like someone desperate to be noticed. He wasn't snapping his fingers. He wasn't waving anyone down. He was just watching. Not like a poor man hoping for kindness. Like a man studying a room. Rose stopped at the table and gave her professional smile. "Good evening, sir," she said. "My name is Rose. I'll be taking care of you tonight." The man looked up. His eyes were sharp but not cruel. He didn't stare at her body. He didn't look at her like she was below him. He looked at her like she was human. "Good evening," he replied. Rose nodded slightly. "What can I get you to drink?" He glanced at the menu for a second, then answered calmly, "The cheapest beer." Rose waited. She expected a little pause inside herself, maybe a little disappointment because tips mattered. But nothing came. She simply nodded. Of course. And she meant it. As she turned to walk away, Rose felt that familiar pain in her shoes. The soles were worn. The back heel was weak. She had promised herself she would buy a new pair this month. But then Kevin had his test again. And the money disappeared before it even entered her hand. She returned with the beer and placed it gently on the table. Rose kept her hands steady. She had learned how. When your life is falling apart, you learn to keep your hands steady. "Please let me know when you're ready to order," she said. "Thank you," the man replied. Rose nodded and walked away. But after only a few steps, she glanced back without meaning to. The man was still watching the room. And for some reason, Rose felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Not hope, not yet, but curiosity. Gregory Danjuma loved the restaurant at night. Not because of the food, not because of the music. Because of the power. This place was like a stage. And he was the man who controlled the lights. Gregory stood near the host station, with one hand on his tablet, pretending to check reservations. He already knew the list by heart. He just liked looking important. He watched rich guests enter. He watched how the hostess's smile became sweeter when a designer handbag appeared. He watched how waiters hurried faster when the guest wore a watch worth a car. That was how the world worked. And Gregory respected the world, because the world respected money. Then he noticed table 32 again. The man was still there, still calm. Gregory narrowed his eyes slightly. A man who looked like that should not be comfortable in a place like this. Normally those ones either begged for attention, or they left quickly out of shame. But this one didn't look ashamed. Gregory's eyes followed him. Old jacket, thick glasses, work boots, and yet he sat like he belonged. Gregory didn't like that. He shifted his attention and spotted Rose at the bar area, picking up an order. Rose Benson. Gregory's mouth tightened slightly. That girl annoyed him, not because she was rude. No, because she was quiet. Quiet people listened more than they spoke. Quiet people noticed patterns. Quiet people stored things. And Gregory did not like staff that stored things. He wanted staff that forgot. He wanted staff that obeyed. A waiter walked up to him. "Sir, table 5 asked if they can see the wine list again." Gregory's smile returned instantly, like a mask sliding into place. "Of course. Tell them I'll be there personally." The waiter hurried away. Gregory walked to table 5 with confidence and greeted the guests warmly. "Good evening, gentlemen. Enjoying yourselves?" They smiled at him like he mattered. Gregory soaked it in. Then as he stood there, his eyes drifted again to table 32. The man at table 32 looked up at the same moment. Their eyes met across the room. Gregory felt something small and cold in his stomach. Not fear, not exactly, more like irritation. Like a rat that refused to run when you stomped your foot. He broke eye contact first and forced another laugh for the guests at table 5. But inside his mind, a decision formed quietly. Watch that table. Watch Rose, because Gregory had a rule of his own. Anyone who didn't play their role had to be reminded of it. Rose did not take her break during her shift. She almost never did. Break time was when some staff sat behind the kitchen, ate fast, and laughed at small jokes to feel normal for 5 minutes. But Rose used her break time to count tips, calculate transport money, and check her phone for hospital messages. Tonight her phone stayed silent for too long. That silence was the worst kind. It was the kind that made her mind create scary pictures. What if Kevin's breathing became worse again? What if the oxygen finished? What if the nurse was busy and didn't notice on time? Rose tried to push those thoughts away while she worked. She moved from table to table, poured water, carried plates, cleaned spills, smiled when she had to, and kept her voice calm, like nothing inside her was shaking. But inside, her worry grew. When she finally saw the wall clock near the service station move past 11:30 p.m., she felt her chest loosen slightly. Closing time was close. She could leave soon. And the first thing she would do once she got outside was call the ward herself, even if the nurse got angry. The final guests were the usual type, men who stayed too long because they enjoyed being served, women who kept taking pictures, people who spoke loudly because they liked hearing their own voice in expensive places. Rose smiled when she had to, but her smile was thin. Near midnight, the restaurant started to slow down. The music dropped lower. The kitchen noise softened, some lights dimmed. Waiters began wiping tables and stacking chairs. A busboy swept quietly, dragging the broom across the floor with tired hands. Rose returned to the back and untied her apron. She could feel the sweat dried on her skin. Her hair, pulled back tightly, made her scalp ache. Her feet felt like they were filled with hot stones. She walked into the staff room and sat down for a moment, not because she wanted to rest, but because her body simply refused to keep standing without permission. The staff room smelled like stale coffee and tired people. A girl in another uniform was complaining about her boyfriend. "He didn't even call me today," the girl said, rolling her eyes. "Imagine, after I cooked for him yesterday." Another worker laughed. Rose listened without reacting. She didn't envy them, not really. She just felt like she lived in a different world. Her own phone buzzed suddenly. Rose's heart jumped. She grabbed it quickly, almost dropping it. Kevin. A message. "I'm okay. Nurse says breathing better. Don't panic, please." Rose stared at the screen like she didn't trust it. Then she exhaled slowly. "Thank God," she whispered, her voice so low nobody heard. Her eyes stung. Not tears of happiness exactly, more like tears of relief mixed with exhaustion. She typed back quickly, her thumbs moving fast. "I'm coming now. Did you eat? I'll bring something small." A reply came almost immediately. "I ate biscuit. Don't worry, just come." Rose stood up. She changed into a simple black dress and flat slippers that were almost as worn as her work shoes. She combed her fingers through her hair, checked her face in the small cracked mirror, and tried to look like someone whose life wasn't hanging by a thread. Before she left, she counted her money. Not because she enjoyed it, because she had to. Transportfare.smallfood.hospitalwater. And maybe, just maybe, if there was anything left, she could put it aside for new shoes. She looked down at her work shoes where they sat near her locker. The soles were worn thin. The front leather had peeled back slightly like a wound that wouldn't heal. Rose swallowed. New shoes would have to wait again. She stepped outside into Lagos night. The air was cool, but the island still smelled like money, perfume, car exhaust, and grilled meat from late-night spots. A few cars sped past. Security men leaned on gates, watching strangers carefully. Rose hugged her bag close and walked to the bus stop. A Danfo passed, too full to stop properly. "Mainland! Mainland!" the conductor shouted like the word was a battle cry. Rose didn't enter. She needed to go to the hospital first. She waited. The streetlights made soft pools of light on the road. In the distance, a siren wailed briefly, then faded. When the bus finally came, Rose climbed in and sat near the window. As the bus moved, she watched Lagos slide past. Tall buildings, then smaller streets, then darker corners where people slept under shop fronts and street dogs moved like shadows. Her phone rested in her lap. She stared at it, then at her reflection in the glass. She didn't look like a hero. She looked like a tired girl who wanted to survive one more day. But Rose didn't know that while she was on that bus, in a restaurant she had just left, a man at table 32 was watching her world with sharp eyes. And for the first time in a long time, that man was beginning to feel something dangerous. Not pity. Not amusement. Something colder. something serious. Jason had already learned enough within the first hour. He learned that people could be cruel without raising their voice. He learned that disrespect could come wrapped in polite words. He learned that in places like this, kindness was not free, it was calculated. But he didn't come here only to watch the staff. He came to watch himself too. To see what he would feel when the world treated him like he didn't matter. At first, the feeling was familiar. That old bitterness he had buried years ago. Because there was a time he had been treated like this. Before success, before connections, before private elevators and boardrooms. Back then he had promised himself something. If I ever become powerful, I will never use power to crush people. Yet here he was, the owner of a restaurant, where power crushed people, quietly, every day. Jason sat at table 32, with his menu open but his mind elsewhere. He watched how long it took before anyone checked on him. 10 minutes, 15. He drank water slowly, not because he was thirsty, but because he wanted to see if someone would notice. Nobody noticed. A waiter passed close to him, carrying a tray of cocktails. The waiter's eyes moved over Jason like he was glass. Invisible. Jason almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was accurate. He lowered the menu slightly and looked toward the center of the restaurant. Gregory Danjuma was still playing his game. Laughing with big men, bending slightly, calling them sir, patting backs, then snapping at staff when he thought nobody important could see. Jason's eyes narrowed. The man was smooth but not wise. Jason had seen men like him in business. Men who grew quickly because they spoke loudly. Men who stole slowly because nobody checked the corners. The kitchen doors banged again. Jason turned just as Rose approached his table. Her walk was quick but controlled. Her face was calm, but her eyes were tired in a way that made Jason pause. Tired eyes always told the truth. "Are you ready to order, sir?" she asked. Jason closed the menu slowly. He didn't answer immediately. He studied her face again, not in a rude way, in a careful way. She had dark circles under her eyes. Her lips were slightly dry. Her uniform was neat but worn. The apron had faded lines like it had been washed too many times. And yet, she still spoke with respect. Jason decided. He would test more than the restaurant tonight. He would test the people running it. He would test how far their judgment went. "I'm ready," he said quietly. "I'll have the emperor's cut." Rose blinked. Just once. But it was enough. Jason saw the thought pass through her mind like a quick shadow. "Sir, are you sure?" Rose didn't say it. She didn't embarrass him. She didn't laugh. She didn't call Gregory. Instead, she asked the proper question, the one written in her training. "And how would you like it prepared?" Jason felt something small shift in his chest. Respect. Not fake respect. Not rich man respect. Human respect. "Medium rare," he said. Rose wrote it down. Her hand was steady, but Jason noticed the slight tension in her fingers, like a person holding fear tightly so it doesn't spill. "And your drink, sir?" she asked. Jason paused for just a moment. Then he went further. "A glass of Chateau Blanc, 1998. Rose's pen stopped. This time she didn't blink. She froze slightly, like her body needed a second to catch up with what her ears heard. Jason could imagine what she was thinking. That wine was expensive. Not Lagos expensive. Life-changing expensive for someone like her. Rose lifted her eyes to his again. Jason met her gaze. He didn't smile. He didn't try to convince her. He simply looked at her calmly like a man who knew what he was doing. Rose swallowed, then nodded. "All right, sir," she said quietly. No insult. No question. Just professionalism. As she turned and walked away, Jason watched her shoulders. They were tense. Not because she was angry. Because she was afraid. Jason's eyes moved to the manager's station. He saw Gregory Danjuma glance at the system screen. Jason saw Gregory's face change instantly, and Jason understood something. This order had just thrown a stone into still water. Now he would see who the ripples would expose. Rose entered the order into the system with a calm face, but inside her chest her heart was beating too fast. She could hear it in her ears. Boom! 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 The POS system flashed the alert immediately. High-value order. Rose stared at the red warning for half a second. Then she clicked confirm, because what else could she do? The customer ordered it, and she had treated him with dignity. But the dignity she gave him would now become a weapon used against her. Rose didn't need prophecy to know that. She had lived long enough under Gregory Danjuma to know how his mind worked. Gregory loved two things, money and fear. And when he couldn't squeeze money out of someone, he squeezed fear. Rose moved toward the wine station to prepare the glass, hoping she could do it quickly and return before Gregory reached her. But Gregory was faster. He appeared at her side like a shadow. Rose. His voice was low, too calm. That was how Rose knew he was angry. Yes, sir, she replied, keeping her eyes down. Gregory stood close enough that she could smell his cologne, expensive, sharp, almost choking. He looked at the screen, then looked at her. Table 32, he asked softly. Rose nodded. Yes, sir. The Emperor's cut, Gregory continued, still speaking like a man having a normal conversation. Rose nodded again. Yes, sir. And Chateau Blanc, 1998. Rose's fingers tightened around the notepad. Yes, sir. Gregory's mouth twitched. Not a smile. Something uglier. Did you collect a card? He asked. Rose swallowed. No, sir. Gregory leaned slightly closer. So you looked at him, he said. And you thought, yes, this one can pay. Rose wanted to explain. She wanted to say, he ordered it calmly. He didn't look confused. He didn't look like someone joking. But explanations usually punished her. So she chose her words carefully. He didn't seem unsure, sir, she said. And I didn't want to insult a guest. Gregory let out a short laugh. It wasn't loud. It wasn't friendly. It was the laugh of a man who enjoyed watching people beg. Insult a guest, he repeated. Rose, you're very funny. Rose kept her face straight. Gregory glanced around quickly, making sure nearby staff were busy and the rich guest couldn't hear. Then his voice dropped even lower. That man is a problem, Gregory said. Do you understand? Rose nodded. Yes, sir. And if he eats and runs, Gregory continued, you will pay. Rose's stomach turned. Her mouth went dry. Sir, she started. Gregory lifted a finger, a small gesture. But Rose stopped immediately. Gregory stepped closer. Now his face was only inches from hers. You already owe, he whispered. Rose's throat tightened. That word again. Oh. Gregory enjoyed saying it because he knew it could choke the air out of her. Your little inventory mistake, he said softly. Remember? Rose remembered. Of course, she remembered. She remembered the day she entered the wrong number because she had spent the night at the hospital with Kevin. She remembered Gregory calling her into his office. She remembered how he turned a small mistake into a giant debt. She remembered how he smiled while doing it. Rose's eyes lowered. Yes, sir, she said quietly. Gregory's breath brushed her cheek as he spoke. If that man cannot pay, he whispered, you'll pay the stake in the wine. Every naira. On top of what you already owe me. Rose felt dizzy for a second. That wine alone could wipe her out. That steak alone could swallow her salary. Gregory leaned back slightly, enjoying the fear on her face. Then he delivered the real poison. And don't forget, he said, his voice still smooth. I know about your brother's treatment schedule. Rose froze. Her fingers went numb. Gregory watched her reaction like he was watching a movie. If I make one call, he continued calmly, and tell them you've been dismissed, your insurance details and employment letter will be questioned. You understand what I'm saying, right? Rose's chest squeezed. She nodded slowly. Yes, sir. Gregory's smile returned briefly, thin and satisfied. Good, he said. Then do your job, and don't try to be a hero. He adjusted his suit jacket and walked away as if nothing happened. Rose stood still for a moment. Her legs felt weak. She turned toward table 32 with the wine bottle in her hand, trying to keep her face calm. Because in places like this, if you show fear, the wrong people smell it. As she walked, she looked at the man at table 32. Jason, still sitting calmly, still watching. When she reached the table, she poured the wine carefully, the way she had been trained. Her hands did not shake, but her heart was shaking enough for her whole body. Jason looked up at her, and for a second Rose thought he might say something. Not about the wine, about what he saw. Instead, he simply asked, in a quiet voice that felt almost gentle, "Is everything all right?" Rose smiled professionally. The smile was smooth, perfect. A lie that kept her alive. "Yes, sir," she said. "Everything is fine." But Jason's eyes didn't move away. He knew, and Rose knew that he knew. And somehow that made the fear inside her shift into something else, something dangerous, something that could become courage. Jason did not touch the wine immediately. He held the glass lightly by the stem and watched the deep color of it as Rose stepped away. The wine smelled expensive, even before he tasted it. But Jason's mind was no longer on food. It was on Rose. It was on the water, she said, "Everything is fine," with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. He had seen that smile before. Not in restaurants, in boardrooms, in offices, in people who feared the person standing over them, but had learned to pretend they didn't. Jason turned his head slightly and looked across the room. Gregory Danjuma was back near the host stand, speaking to the hostess. His body language was relaxed again, but his eyes were sharp. He kept looking toward table 32 like the table had suddenly become personal. Jason lowered the glass and finally took a sip. The wine was excellent. But Jason didn't feel pleasure. He felt anger. Quiet anger. The kind that doesn't explode. It settles. He took another slow sip and watched. Rose moved from table to table. She kept her shoulders straight. She kept her voice steady. She smiled politely. She did her job like someone who couldn't afford mistakes. And yet Jason kept noticing small things. When Rose passed Gregory, her body stiffened slightly. Not enough for customers to see, but enough for someone watching closely. Gregory spoke to her twice without smiling. Each time, Rose nodded quickly and walked away faster than she had been walking before. Jason leaned back in his chair. This was not just a strict manager. This was fear. Real fear. Jason's fingers tightened slightly around the glass. He told himself to be careful. He couldn't just storm into the restaurant and accuse a manager based on his instincts. That was not how things worked. That was not evidence. But he also knew this. His company had always been built on one promise: quality. If that promise was being broken under his nose, then everything he owned could rot from the inside without anyone noticing. Jason picked up his fork and began eating. Not quickly, slowly. He tasted the steak like a man tasting a lie. Every bite was perfect, cooked well, served well. But the perfection now looked different to him, like a painted wall hiding cracks. Rose returned once to check on him. "How is everything, sir?" she asked. Jason looked up at her. "You've done well," he said quietly. Rose blinked. Then she gave a small professional smile. "Thank you, sir," she said. Jason hesitated. He wanted to ask, "What is he doing to you?" But he didn't. Not here. Not with Gregory's eyes watching from across the room. Instead, he asked something simpler. "Do you like working here?" he asked gently, like a man making small talk. Rose's hand tightened around her notepad for a second. "Yes, sir," she replied quickly. It was too quick. Jason nodded slow, as if he accepted the answer. But inside, he knew it was another lie for survival. Rose began to step away, Then Jason spoke again, keeping his voice low. "Your shoes," he said. Rose paused. She looked down without meaning to. Jason continued softly. "You've been working too hard." Rose swallowed. Her mouth opened slightly, like she wanted to speak, but words didn't come out. In a place like this, words could destroy you. She forced a smile. "It's normal, sir," she said. "We all work hard." Then she walked away quickly, as if staying near him too long could be dangerous. Jason watched her go. His appetite was gone now. He placed his fork down. Across the room, Gregory Danjuma stared in his direction again. Jason met his eyes and held the gaze. Gregory looked away first. Jason's mouth hardened slightly. The thread was there. And Jason had started pulling it. By the time Rose arrived at the public hospital, the night was deep. The air around the entrance smelled of disinfectant, sweat, and boiled noodles from a small food cellar sitting under a weak bulb. People sat on benches, some sleeping upright, some crying quietly, some holding their stomachs, their heads, their babies. Hospitals didn't close. Pain didn't respect time. Rose walked fast, her bag pressed to her side. She passed a security man who barely looked up, then climbed the stairs to the ward. The corridor lights flickered. A nurse walked past, carrying a file, her face tired and blank. Rose reached the door and paused, not because she was afraid of what she would see, because she needed 1 second to prepare herself. Then she pushed the door open. Kevin lay on the bed closest to the window. He was thin, too thin for 17. His cheeks had sunk a bit. His eyes looked older than they should. But when he saw Rose, his face softened. "You came," he said, his voice low. Rose forced a smile. "Did you think I won't come?" she asked, walking to his bed. Kevin tried to smile back, but it ended in a small cough. He turned his face slightly into the pillow, as if he didn't want her to see how weak it sounded. Rose sat on the edge of the bed and reached out, placing her hand on his wrist. His skin was warm, but his pulse felt too fast. "How are you now?" she asked gently. Kevin shrugged lightly. "Better than before," he lied. Rose didn't argue. She had learned not to argue. Sometimes sick people lied because they didn't want to be a burden. Rose opened her bag and brought out a small plastic pack. "I brought food," she said. Kevin looked at it. "What is it?" "Rice," Rose replied. "Small one. Eat." Kevin sighed. "Rose, you don't have to—" "Kevin," Rose interrupted softly. "Don't start." Kevin gave a small smile and accepted the pack, though he didn't open it immediately. Rose looked around the ward. 2 other patients lay nearby. One woman was sleeping with her baby pressed to her chest. Another man moaned quietly, turning his head from side to side. A nurse's voice sounded down the corridor. Rose lowered her voice. "Did the doctor come?" she asked. Kevin nodded. "He came. He said I need another test next week." Rose's heart tightened. Another test meant another bill. "Did he say how much?" she asked carefully. Kevin hesitated. Rose looked at him. Kevin sighed. "Rose, don't be angry." Rose's throat went dry. "Kevin," she repeated. "How much?" Kevin swallowed. 200,000. Rose stared at him. For a moment she couldn't even speak. 200,000. That number was not just money. It was rent, it was food, it was transport, it was survival. Rose's fingers tightened around the edge of the bed. Kevin watched her face. "I told him we don't have it," Kevin said quickly. "He said we should try. He said the test will help them adjust my treatment." Rose breathed in slowly, then out. She tried to keep her face calm, because Kevin's eyes were watching her like a child watching an adult for safety. "We'll find it," she said quietly. Kevin shook his head slowly. "How?" he asked, his voice breaking slightly. "Rose, you're killing yourself." Rose forced a small smile. "Don't talk like that," she said. "You're not dying, you're just sick, and we will handle it." Kevin's eyes filled slightly. "Sometimes I wish I didn't exist," he whispered. Rose's heart cracked. She reached for his face gently. "Don't ever say that again," she said softly but firmly. "Do you hear me?" Kevin looked away. Rose leaned closer. "You are the reason I'm still standing," she said. Kevin blinked hard. Rose sat back again. Her phone buzzed in her bag. She ignored it. Nothing mattered more than this bed. After a while, Kevin asked quietly, "How was work?" Rose paused. She could have said, "Fine." But Kevin knew her too well. Rose stared at her hands. "There was a man," she said slowly. Kevin looked at her. "What man?" Rose hesitated again. "A customer," she said. "He sat at the bad table near the kitchen." Kevin frowned. "That table you always complain about?" Rose gave a small nod. "Yes." "What happened?" Rose's eyes narrowed slightly, remembering. "He didn't act like other people," she said quietly. "He looked poor, but he carried himself like he wasn't afraid of anybody." Kevin studied her face. "And?" Rose swallowed. "And he ordered the most expensive steak," she whispered. Kevin's eyes widened. "Ah, he wanted to disgrace you." Rose shook her head slowly. "No, that's the thing. He didn't look like someone joking." Kevin stared at her. "So what did Greg say?" Rose's stomach tightened at the name. She didn't answer immediately. Kevin's face hardened. "He threatened you again," Kevin said, not as a question. Rose breathed out slowly. "Yes." Kevin looked down at his hands. "I hate that man," he whispered. Rose said nothing. Because hate wouldn't pay hospital bills. Rose stayed with Kevin until he slept. When his breathing became steady, she pulled her chair back slightly and rested her head against the wall. Her eyes closed, but her mind stayed awake, because she knew the truth. This was not a life. This was a trap, and she didn't know how long she could keep pretending she was okay. Rose returned to the restaurant the next day with heavy eyes. She hadn't slept well. She had left the hospital early morning, gone home to wash quickly, then returned for her shift. Her body moved like it belonged to someone else. But she still arrived early. She still wore her uniform neatly. She still tied her hair back tightly, because showing weakness at work was like bleeding in front of a predator. And Gregory Danjuma was always hungry. The restaurant was busy again that night. The island crowd came in waves. A table of bankers, a table of politicians, a table of influencers with cameras and bright laughter. Rose moved quietly through it all, doing her work. Then around 9 p.m., she saw him again. The man from table 32. The poor man with the calm eyes. He was seated at the same table again. Rose froze slightly near the service station. Why did he come back? A customer like that usually didn't return quickly. Unless... Rose felt something uncomfortable in her chest. Unless he was looking for something. Rose tried to focus on her other tables, but she kept glancing at him without meaning to. He sat quietly, watching. And Gregory Danjuma noticed Rose glancing. Gregory didn't like staff who looked in the wrong direction. He waited until Rose passed near him, then he called her name softly. "Rose." She stopped. "Yes, sir." Gregory's eyes were calm. Too calm. "After your shift," he said, "you will come to my office." Rose felt her stomach drop. Her mouth went dry. "Yes, sir," she managed. Gregory smiled slightly. It was not kind. "You know why?" he added. Rose nodded quickly. "Yes, sir." Gregory walked away. Rose stood still for a moment. Her fingers went numb. She already knew what it meant. Late-night books. The real books. The ones Gregory didn't want anyone else to see. The ones he had forced her to touch because she once studied accounting. Rose glanced toward table 32 again. The man was still sitting calmly, watching. And Rose wondered something she had never allowed herself to wonder before. If a powerful person sat at that table, would Gregory still treat me like this? She shook her head quickly. Hope was dangerous. Rose returned to work. but her whole body felt like it was counting down to the end of the night. Because after closing time, Gregory Danjuma would close the restaurant and open her cage. By the time the last guest finally left, it was past midnight again. The restaurant looked different when it was empty. The soft music was off. The warm laughter was gone. The tables were bare, wiped clean until they shone. Chairs were turned upside down on some tables. The smell of steak still hung in the air, but now it mixed with bleach and tired sweat. Rose stood at the service station, drying a glass slowly. Not because the glass still had water, because her hands needed something to do. Her eyes kept drifting toward Gregory Danjuma's office door. It was down a short hallway, not far from the wine cellar. The door was plain compared to the rest of the restaurant. No gold, no decoration. But Rose knew that behind it was the real restaurant. Not the luxury customers paid for. The real place where staff cried quietly and swallowed fear like food. A waiter walked past her and murmured, "Sorry, Rose." Rose didn't reply. She only nodded. She didn't ask what he was sorry for, because she already knew. When Gregory called you after shift, it was never for praise. Rose washed her hands, dried them, then took a slow breath. She walked down the hallway as if she was walking to a court judgment. The closer she got to the door, the more her chest tightened. Her heart wasn't beating fast like panic. It was beating heavy like a drum warning her that something bad was waiting. She knocked once. "Come in," Gregory's voice replied. Rose opened the door and stepped inside. The office was cool, air-conditioned, and smelled faintly of cologne and paper. Gregory sat behind a desk that looked too expensive for a restaurant manager. On the wall behind him were framed pictures. Gregory shaking hands with important-looking men, Gregory smiling beside a politician, Gregory holding a trophy at a charity golf event. Rose stood near the door. Gregory didn't look up immediately. He was typing something on his computer slowly, like he wanted her to feel the silence. Then he looked up. "Sit," he said. Rose sat on the chair opposite him. Gregory leaned back slightly. He looked relaxed. Too relaxed. Rose waited, eyes lowered respectfully, hands folded in her lap. Gregory tapped a pen against the desk. "You like that man at table 32, he said suddenly. Rose's head lifted quickly. "Sir?" Gregory smiled, like her confusion amused him. "You've been looking at him too much," Gregory said. "I've noticed." Rose's mouth went dry. "I'm sorry, sir," she said quickly. "I was just doing my job." Gregory leaned forward a little. "That man is not your friend," he said calmly. "You don't know who he is." Rose swallowed. "Yes, sir." Gregory watched her for a moment, then sighed dramatically like she was tiring him. "Okay," he said, waving a hand. "Let's do what we came here for." He turned his computer screen slightly, then pulled out a folder from a drawer. Rose's stomach tightened. The folder was thick. Too thick. Gregory opened it and pushed it toward her. "Balance this," he said. Rose stared at the documents. Invoices, delivery notes, supplier names. Some looked normal, some didn't. Rose had seen some of these before, but tonight Gregory had arranged them differently, as if he wanted her to see how deep it went. "Sir," Rose began carefully, "I'm not in accounts." Gregory's eyes sharpened. "You studied accounting," he replied. Rose's throat tightened. "I only did community college," she said softly. "I didn't finish." Gregory smiled. "You know enough," he said, "and you already owe me, so don't start acting smart." Rose lowered her eyes. Gregory slid a calculator toward her like he was giving her a weapon. "Work," he said simply. Rose picked up the first invoice. The supplier name made her pause. Prime Organic Meats. Rose had never seen any delivery truck with that name. In fact, she couldn't remember a single staff member ever saying, "Prime Organic Meats has delivered." But here it was on paper, repeated. She flipped through the pages. Same supplier, different dates, huge amounts. Rose's hands became cold. Gregory watched her face closely. Something wrong? He asked smoothly. Rose forced her voice to stay calm. No, sir, she lied. Gregory nodded like he was satisfied. Good, he said. Add the numbers. Rose began adding. But as she added, she noticed patterns. The prices were too high for the quantity listed. The numbers looked crafted. Not natural. Like someone trying to make theft look like business. Rose swallowed hard. Sir, she said carefully, some of these don't match the stock sheets. Gregory's eyes turned cold. Rose, he said softly, don't make me repeat myself. Rose froze. Gregory leaned forward, lowering his voice until it became a whisper. I'm not asking for your opinion, he said. I'm telling you what to do. Rose nodded quickly. Yes, sir. Gregory leaned back again, satisfied. That's better, he said. Rose continued working. For almost an hour she sat there, adding numbers, checking entries, balancing fake invoices against other fake entries Gregory had prepared. Her mind screamed, this was fraud. Real fraud. Not small stealing. Not taking tips. This was organized, planned, big. And Rose was being forced to touch it, to become part of it. She felt sick. At some point, Gregory stood up and walked behind her chair, placing his hand lightly on her shoulder. Rose's body tensed instantly. Gregory leaned down near her ear. Listen carefully, he said quietly. If you ever think of talking to anyone, just remember your brother. Rose's eyes stung. Her fingers tightened around the pen until it hurt. Gregory patted her shoulder lightly, like a man comforting a child. Then he walked back to his desk and sat down. Rose wanted to scream, but she didn't, because screaming wouldn't save Kevin. So she did the only thing she could do. She kept working. Jason returned to the restaurant because he couldn't let it go. He told himself it was business. He told himself it was quality control. But deep down he knew it wasn't only that. It was Rose. It was the fear in her eyes hidden under polite words. He had gone home that first night and tried to sleep. But sleep didn't come easily. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Gregory leaning too close to Rose, speaking low, controlling her with something unseen. Jason had lived long enough to recognize it. Blackmail. Threat. Power abuse. Jason couldn't prove it yet, but he could feel it. So he returned. He wore the same old clothes again, the same glasses, the same boots. He walked in again like a man who didn't matter. The hostess looked surprised, not happy. She forced a smile that was not warm. Back again? She asked. Jason nodded calmly. Yes. Reservation? No. She sighed slightly, then sat him again at table 32 without argument, almost like she wanted him out of sight quickly. Jason sat down and waited. He watched the dining room again. Gregory was there again, playing the same game, smiling loudly at rich guests, snapping at staff, acting like king of the room. Jason's eyes narrowed. Then Rose appeared. She froze when she saw him, not because she hated him, because she was shocked. Jason noticed how quickly she recovered. Her face smoothed over. Her professional mask returned. She approached him slowly. Good evening, sir, she said. Jason looked at her closely. Her eyes looked more tired tonight, like she hadn't slept, like someone had kept her up late. Jason felt his anger rise again, but he kept his voice calm. Good evening, Rose, he replied. Rose blinked. Most customers didn't remember staff names. That's nice, she said carefully. Can I get you something to drink? Water first, Jason replied. Thank you. Rose nodded and walked away. Jason watched her. She moved like a person carrying a heavy secret. Not just stress, a secret. And Jason made a decision quietly as he sat at table 32. He would not leave this place until he understood what was happening. Rose returned to Jason's table with water. She placed it down carefully. Are you ready to order? She asked. Jason didn't answer immediately. He looked at her face. Then he asked softly, "Did you rest today?" Rose froze. It was such a simple question. Not rude, not romantic, just human. Rose's throat tightened. "Yes, sir," she lied again. Jason nodded slowly like he accepted it. But Rose felt exposed, because she had not rested. She had sat in Gregory's office till late, balancing lies on paper, then gone home and stared at her ceiling with fear. Rose swallowed. "Would you like to see the menu?" she asked quickly, trying to regain control. Jason shook his head slowly. "Not yet," he said. Rose waited, confused. Jason leaned slightly forward. His voice dropped. "Rose," he said quietly, "your manager talks to you like he owns you." Rose's heart stopped for a moment. Her eyes widened. She looked around quickly. Nobody was near enough to hear, but Gregory was still in the room. Rose's hands became cold. "Sir," she whispered, "please." Jason watched her face. He could see it clearly now. Fear. Not ordinary fear. The kind of fear that comes from being trapped. Jason leaned back slightly. He didn't push further because he knew something. A trapped person doesn't confess easily, not because they are weak, because they are trying to survive. Rose forced a shaky smile. "I'm fine, sir," she whispered again. Then she stepped away quickly. But as she walked, Rose's mind was racing. Because the man at table 32 was not like other customers. He was watching too much, listening too much, as if he was looking for something. And suddenly a thought entered Rose's mind, slow and dangerous. What if he can help? The thought scared her, because hope was not safe. Hope made you careless. Hope made you take risks. And risks could kill Kevin. Rose tried to push the thought away as she returned to her other tables. But it stayed, like a small flame in a dark room. And the more she tried to ignore it, the brighter it became. Rose tried to act normal for the rest of the night. She moved from table to table, smiled when required, cleared plates, poured water, and kept her voice calm. But inside her head, everything was loud. Because the man at table 32 had said the thing nobody ever said. Your manager talks to you like he owns you. It wasn't a romantic line. It wasn't even dramatic. It was just truth, spoken softly like he was stating the weather. And truth was dangerous. Rose kept glancing toward Gregory without meaning to. Gregory was doing what he always did, laughing with rich guests, touching shoulders, acting like a well-trained politician. But Rose now saw him differently. She saw the way his eyes stayed sharp even when he smiled. She saw the way he checked the room like a paranoid man. And she saw something else too. Gregory was watching table 32. He was watching the poor man. Rose felt her mouth go dry. She served her last table and returned to the service station to breathe for a second. Her fingers trembled as she arranged cutlery. A fellow waitress, Nkechi, passed and whispered, "Rose, you dey okay?" Rose forced a small smile. "I'm fine." But Nkechi didn't look convinced. She just shook her head lightly and walked away. Rose turned and looked toward table 32 again. The man sat the same way he sat before, quiet, calm, watching the room like he was reading it. He wasn't drinking too fast. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He wasn't even trying to be noticed. But he was seeing everything. Rose's chest tightened. Her mind pulled her back to the hospital. Kevin on that bed. The number the doctor said, 200,000. The way Kevin's voice broke when he whispered he didn't want to be a burden. Rose squeezed her eyes shut for a second. Then she opened them. If she stayed silent, Gregory would keep using her dot. If she stayed silent, he would keep doing whatever he was doing with those fake invoices. And one day, when the truth finally came out, Gregory would not fall alone. He would drag her name into it. He would say she helped him. And maybe the police would believe him. Maybe the hospital would stop Kevin's care. Maybe everything would collapse. Rose swallowed hard. She couldn't fight Gregory with strength, but she could fight him with proof. That was the only thing that mattered in this world. Proof. Rose waited for a brief moment when the service station was quiet. Then she slipped into the small break room and locked the door. Her hands were shaking now, for real. She pulled a clean white napkin from the stack. The fabric was crisp, too white for how dirty her life felt. She searched her apron pocket and found a pen. The pen shook in her fingers as she stared at the blank napkin. What should she write? Help me sounded weak. My manager is bad sounded like gossip. And writing too much could expose her. She needed to write something short. Something that would make a careful person move. Rose closed her eyes, thinking of the documents. Prime organic meats. Invoices that didn't match. Numbers that didn't make sense. Then she remembered the most important thing. The hidden safe Gregory always checked before he left. The way he once boasted to a friend in the office, laughing, "Everything is recorded. If anything happens, I disappear." Rose's eyes opened. Her breathing became slow and controlled. She began to write. Not too long, not too emotional. Just enough to point to the real place where truth lived. When she finished, she folded the napkin into a small square and pressed it inside her apron pocket like it was a burning coal. Her legs felt weak when she stepped out of the break room. She returned to the dining area with the napkin against her skin. Now she had a new problem. How would she give him the note without Gregory seeing? Rose waited. She served other tables. She cleared plates. She nodded. She smiled. But her eyes kept tracking Gregory's position in the room like her life depended on it. Because it did. Finally, the moment came. Gregory was near the host station, arguing softly with the hostess about a reservation problem. His back was turned. Rose saw table 32 finishing up. The man was done eating. His plate was almost clear. He held his glass loosely, not rushing, not leaving. Rose approached with a calm face. "Would you like anything else, sir?" she asked, her voice steady. "No," he replied gently. "Thank you, Rose." Her heart hammered. She picked up the plate, then the glass. Her hands moved with practiced skill, like she had done this 1,000 times. And she did the hardest part in a single breath. As she reached for the bill tray, her other hand slipped the folded napkin from her apron pocket and placed it on the table. Then she covered it quickly with the tray, as if it was normal. Fast, clean, silent. She turned to leave. Then the man spoke again. "Rose." Rose froze. Her blood went cold. Was he exposing her? Was he calling her back? Did he see? Rose turned slowly. He wasn't smiling, but he wasn't angry either. He looked careful, like he understood what he was holding. "You dropped something," he said quietly. Rose's brain raced. She forced a shaky smile and leaned in slightly, whispering the first excuse that came to her mouth. "My tip," she whispered, almost without sound. "Please." Then she turned and walked away fast, her legs trembling, her whole body burning with fear. She didn't look back. Because if she looked back and saw Gregory watching, she would break. Outside later that night, the man unfolded the napkin under a streetlight, and his face changed. Because Rose didn't write a cry for money. She wrote a warning that could shake an empire. And once that warning entered his hands, the story was no longer only Rose's problem. It became Jason Okafor's war. Jason did not sleep that night. He sat in a quiet room with the napkin in his hand, reading it over and over, not because the words were long, but because the meaning behind them was heavy. By 2 a.m., he had already called the only person he trusted with his private operations. Arthur Adebayo. Arthur did not ask stupid questions. He didn't panic. He didn't talk too much. He listened. Then he said, "If this is real, we move fast, before he destroys evidence." "I want everything off the books," Jason replied. "No internal audits, no warning." "Understood," Arthur said. "I'll bring in Rennie." Rennie Akinyemi was not the type of woman you explained yourself to. She was a quiet professional. Security, intelligence, entry, retrieval. The kind of person who could enter a place without breaking a single thing and leave without leaving a footprint. Before dawn, Jason met her in an empty car park. She studied him in his thrift clothes and thick glasses and said flatly, "You look like a man who wants trouble." Jason replied, "I want truth." Rennie nodded once. "Truth is expensive." "I can pay," Jason said. Rennie's lips twitched slightly, not a smile, just acknowledgement. "Good, then we do it clean." That same night, Jason returned to the restaurant once again. Same disguise, same table, same calm, and the moment he sat down, he felt the air had changed. Gregory Danjuma was not relaxed anymore. He was watching table 32 too closely now, like a man who sensed danger but didn't know where it was coming from. Rose served Jason with shaking calm, her face controlled, but her eyes exhausted. When she placed his water down, Jason didn't speak much. He didn't want to pull her into more risk. Instead, he simply nodded at her, a quiet sign that said, "I received it. I'm moving." Later that night after closing, Jason and Rennie entered through the service entrance wearing cleaning uniforms. No breaking, no drama, no shouting. They became invisible. Jason stood in the hallway with a mop bucket, acting like a tired cleaner. Rennie moved like a shadow. In minutes, she bypassed the office keypad. She checked the shelves. She found the hidden safe behind the framed pictures and fake awards. She didn't guess the code randomly. She studied what Gregory displayed about himself, his ego, his obsession with image. A trophy from a charity golf event had a date. A framed photo had a number. A small detail that a proud man thought was harmless. Rennie punched in the code. The safe opened. Inside was cash, a spare passport dot, and a thick ledger that had no business being in a restaurant office. Rennie photographed every page and copied the files from Gregory's computer. Supplier records, invoices, bank details, and hidden videos. When they left the office exactly the way they found it. By morning, Arthur's team had confirmed what Jason feared. Prime organic meats was a front. The real supply chain was rotten, cheap, unsafe meat brought in through dirty channels, relabeled, sold at premium price. Money was being washed through shell accounts. Staff were being threatened into silence. And the worst part? Rose Benson had been recorded in Gregory's office. Gregory threatening her, mentioning Kevin, pressing her into helping so he could later blame her if needed. Jason sat quietly as Arthur explained, his voice calm but filled with disgust. "This man is not just stealing," Arthur said. "He's running a criminal operation inside your brand." Jason's jaw tightened. "Today," Jason replied, "he will learn who he was threatening." At 11:45 a.m., 2 black SUVs rolled up to the Brass Crown Steakhouse. Not for show, for closure. Gregory rushed out, smiling hard, thinking maybe a big politician was coming. Then he saw Jason step out, not in thrift clothes, not as poor. Jason wore a simple charcoal suit, clean and sharp, no flashy jewelry, no loud display, just quiet authority. Gregory's smile died on his face. His eyes widened. "Mr. Okafor?" he stammered. Jason walked past him without greeting. He entered the restaurant, his footsteps steady on the polished floor. Staff froze, conversation stopped, even the kitchen seemed to hold its breath. Jason walked straight to table 32 and placed his hand on the wobbly table. "This table," he said calmly, his voice carrying, "showed me what my reports never showed me." Gregory's face drained. Rose stood near the service station holding menus, her hands trembling. She looked like she was about to faint. Jason's eyes moved to her briefly, and his voice softened just a little. "Rose Benson," he called gently. Rose flinched and stepped forward slowly like someone walking to be punished. Gregory's mouth opened quickly. "Sir, I can explain." Jason turned to him, calm and cold. "No," Jason said. "You can answer." He nodded to Arthur and Rennie, then to the officers who stepped forward. Plain clothes, firm faces. Jason didn't shout. He didn't insult. He simply spoke like a man reading a sentence. We have your ledger. We have your supplier trail. We have your bank transfers. And we have your recordings. Gregory stumbled back. This is a misunderstanding, he tried. Arthur held up a tablet, displaying evidence. Rennie added quietly, "It's not a misunderstanding when it's documented." Gregory's lips trembled. He looked around wildly like he wanted someone to save him. Nobody moved. Then Jason said the line that ended everything. "You threatened a young woman using her sick brother," Jason said, his voice low. "You tried to make her your shield. That is the part I find most disgusting." Gregory shook his head rapidly. "She helped me," he blurted, desperate. "She knew." Jason's eyes moved to Rose. "Rose," Jason said gently, "did you help him willingly?" Rose's throat tightened. She looked at Gregory. Then she looked at the floor. Then she lifted her face, and for the first time, her voice did not shake. "No," she said clearly. "He forced me. He used my brother. He said if I talk, my brother will suffer." A stunned silence fell. Gregory's shoulders collapsed. The officers moved in and cuffed him. As they led him away, Gregory tried to speak again, but no one listened. Jason turned back to the staff. "This restaurant will be shut down for inspection," he said. "NAFDAC will do their work. My company will cooperate fully." He looked at Rose again. "Rose," he said quietly, so only she could hear, "you did the right thing." Rose's eyes filled with tears. Jason continued, firm but kind. "Your name is cleared. Your fabricated debt is cancelled, and your brother's treatment will be covered fully starting today." Rose's knees almost gave way. She covered her mouth with her hand. Jason didn't make it a show. He didn't announce it like charity. He just stated it like justice. Arthur stepped forward. "We'll set up a medical trust for Kevin Benson immediately." Rose nodded repeatedly, tears falling freely now. Jason finished with the final closure, the part that tied the story like a knot. "And as for you," he told Rose, "you won't be waiting tables here again. Not because serving is shameful, but because you have integrity, and this company needs that where it matters." Rose stared at him, confused. Jason said it plainly, in simple words. "I'm creating a role for you, ethics and supply oversight. You'll work with my team. You'll help protect staff and protect the supply chain. You'll report directly to Arthur and to me." Rose's lips trembled. "But You're not just anything," Jason said softly. "You were brave when fear was cheaper." Rose didn't have words. She only nodded and cried. Later, after the officers left, after the staff slowly returned to movement, Jason walked back to table 32 one last time. He touched the wobbly table again and said quietly, almost to himself, "This table will stay, not as punishment, as a reminder. Because the truth didn't live in the best seat in the house. Sometimes, the truth lived near the kitchen door, where a tired young woman with worn shoes decided to do what was right." That evening, Rose went to the hospital and held Kevin's hand. And this time, when she said, "We'll be fine," it wasn't a lie. It was the first real truth she had spoken in a long time. And Jason Okafor went back to his glass kingdom, not feeling empty for once, because he had finally found what he came searching for. Not loyalty money could buy, but honesty that risked everything.